Hello everyone, and welcome to Tam's Telling Touch, where real ghost stories come to life. On this channel, we share chilling tales from both Vietnam and around the world, true encounters with the supernatural, submitted by viewers like you. These are stories that were lived, witnessed, or passed down, and now, retold here so you can listen, reflect, and perhaps even shiver. Before we begin today's story, I want to give a quick shout out to two amazing viewers. First, thank you to Tam Tone for being the very first to comment on our last video. And also, a big thanks to Baxabek, whose comment received the most likes. It clearly resonated with many of you. If you want to be featured in the next video, be quick to leave a comment when the story goes live, or share your thoughts in a way that stands out. If you have a ghost story to share, check the description below for the email address or the link to my Facebook page. I'd love to hear your experience. And if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. Your support helps me keep telling these eerie tales, one haunting story at a time. Thank you so much. And now, let's begin. Today, I'm going to share a few chilling stories from a viewer named Jenny. The first story she told me was a personal experience, something that actually happened to her, and it took place not too long ago. When she sent me this story, it was in early February. So I'd say it probably happened just a month or two before that. Jenny said she had gone to a dental clinic to get her teeth done. And it was there that she saw a ghost. Now, to be clear, this wasn't one of those old, run-down dental offices where someone might say, "Oh, it looks haunted." No, this was a very modern, high-rise building. You've probably heard of Landmark 81, right? Well, Jenny wasn't exactly inside Landmark 81 itself, but she was in a nearby building, still part of that upscale area near Binth. There's another building in that area with a similar name, also called Landmark something, and that's where the dental clinic was located. This building is fairly new. It was constructed just a few years ago, and the dental office there is also recently opened. Jenny chose that place because it looked clean, safe, and modern. Now, if you've ever had a dental procedure, you know it can take a while, sometimes over an hour. So after her session was done, while waiting for the next step, Jenny suddenly needed to use the restroom. She got up and went down to the reception area to ask where the restroom was. She told the staff, "I've been waiting a while now and I really need to go." A staff member pointed her in the right direction, saying it was just a short walk away. So Jenny followed the hallway and arrived at the restrooms. On the left was the men's room, clearly labeled. On the right was the women's. She noticed the men's door was fully shut, while the women's door was slightly ajar, just a hand's width open. Now, normally when a restroom door is cracked open like that, you'd assume no one is inside, right? Jenny thought the same. So she reached out, grabbed the door handle. It was one of those push-down handles, not a round knob, and she started to pull the door open. But the moment she did, she felt something pulling hard from the inside. It wasn't just resistance. It felt like someone on the other side was yanking the door back, forcefully. Jenny was shocked. Her first instinct was confusion. Was someone in there? And to be honest, Jenny told me she can be a bit hot-tempered, especially in situations like this, when you're already stressed, trying to hold it in, and suddenly something weird like this happens. So in her mind, she thought, seriously? Who does that? If you're inside, just lock the door. Why leave it cracked open like that? You scared me half to death. She figured it must be some rude woman who forgot to close the door properly. And at that moment, she got annoyed. She told herself, "All right then, let's teach you a little lesson in manners." So she grabbed the handle more firmly this time, and pulled harder. That's when things got really strange. As she pulled, the force on the other side pulled back. When she let go, the handle moved upward. When she pushed down again, the handle resisted, like someone on the other side was actively struggling with her. It wasn't just a door being stuck. It was as if someone was holding it, pushing against her, engaging in a kind of silent tug-of-war. And Jenny said, in that moment, the atmosphere around her began to shift. Because what kind of person plays a game like that? In complete silence, inside a public restroom? Or, was it not a person at all? Jenny told me she didn't want to be rude, so she didn't curse or shout out loud in the middle of a public space. But she did raise her voice a little. She said, "Hello? Is someone in there? If you're using the restroom, could you say something? You left the door open, I thought it was empty. I almost walked in." She waited, but there was no response. And yet, no matter how hard she pulled, the door just wouldn't budge. It was like something, or someone, on the other side was holding it shut. Jenny said the handle wouldn't even move anymore. It was stiff. Locked in place, not by the mechanism, but as if someone's hand was gripping it tight from the inside. She was getting frustrated. So she turned to a receptionist nearby, one of the young girls at the front desk, just a few meters away, and asked, "Can you come check this for me? I think someone's in there, but they won't answer. Maybe the door's stuck or something." The girl's expression changed. Jenny said she noticed it right away. Her face tensed up slightly, her brows furrowed for just a second, and then quickly relaxed, as if trying not to let Jenny notice. But Jenny saw it. Something was off. Still, the girl walked over calmly and said, "There shouldn't be anyone in there. I've been here the whole time. I didn't see anyone go in." Then, without hesitation, she reached for the handle. The moment she touched it, the door swung open, effortlessly. Just like that. Jenny was stunned. She stood there in silence, completely frozen. How could it open so easily? When just seconds ago, it felt like someone was yanking it closed from the inside. She asked the girl, "Was the door stuck or something?" But the girl simply said, "No, it's not stuck. And when you first walked up to it, it was only slightly open, right? Just a small gap." Jenny nodded. "I saw that too," the girl said. "But maybe it was just the wind. You know, sometimes the breeze can make the doors slam shut." Jenny looked at her, confused. "What breeze? We're inside a high-rise building. All the windows are sealed. The air conditioning is central, you don't even feel airflow in the hallways. This place is sealed tight." But by then, the dental assistant had already called Jenny's name, asking her to return for the final part of her appointment. So she let it go. She walked into the restroom, did what she needed to do, and then left the clinic shortly after. It wasn't until she was on her way home that she really started to piece everything together. She thought to herself, "That wasn't the wind. There were three things that don't add up. First, the way the door was pulled shut, it wasn't a gust of air. It was a force, like someone was deliberately resisting her from the inside. And she never felt any wind, no breeze at all. Especially not strong enough to tug the door like that. Second, when she grabbed the handle, it wasn't stuck like a jammed lock. She could move it. But each time she did, there was a counterforce, something pulling it back up, pushing against her. As if another hand was holding the same handle from the other side. And third, the look on that receptionist's face. Jenny remembered clearly how the girl hesitated, how she seemed uncomfortable, like she knew something but didn't want to say it. The way she avoided eye contact and spoke in half answers. It was all too strange. Jenny became convinced that place was haunted. And the staff knew it too. But maybe they couldn't say anything, not when the rent costs hundreds of millions of dong per month. No one wants to scare away customers. Jenny told me. I didn't expect this. Usually when people talk about ghosts, it's in deserted alleys, empty roads, or late at night. But this was a modern, brightly lit dental office. In the middle of the day. In a luxury building. There was no blood. No horrific figure. Just a door that refused to open. A force that didn't want her to come in. And a silence that made it all the more chilling. And that was her first story. One that happened just a few months ago. Now let's move on to the second story from Jenny. This one, she said, was a little sensitive. Since it's still related to going to hospitals and medical stuff, she figured she might as well share it too. At first, she didn't want to talk about it because it was kind of personal. But the thing I love about Jenny is that she's always honest. No matter how awkward or embarrassing something is, if it's the truth, she'll tell it. She even admitted that back in the day, she used to be involved in a few shady things, illegal trading and all that. But she's not the type to hide her past. She owns up to everything. So when she tells her stories, it's not about showing off or making herself look good, it's just real. That's what makes it compelling. Anyway, she told me that a few years ago, she decided to get breast augmentation surgery. The reason? Well, her husband had a bit of a wandering eye. He was always going out, partying, messing around, you get the idea. Friends told her, "Girl, if you want to keep your man, maybe it's time for a little upgrade." So, Jenny made up her mind and went for cosmetic surgery. Now, back then, plastic surgery was already available in Vietnam, but it wasn't as common as it is today. She didn't know much about it, so she started asking around. That's when someone recommended a clinic operating inside Gia NH Hospital. Technically, Gia NH is a state-run hospital, not a place that usually does cosmetic work. But within the hospital grounds, there was a separate private unit, an international cosmetic surgery clinic that rented space there. They were known to be pretty good, even high-end. Jenny said they let you choose your doctor, too. She asked around, and a friend told her, "Pick Dr. Hung. He's got magic hands. All my girlfriends go to him." So she booked an appointment with Dr. Hung. Everything seemed professional, clean, safe, well managed. After her consultation, they gave her the full price breakdown. It was expensive, but she was ready. The doctors explained that recovery time would depend on her health and how her body reacted. If her body responded well, she could go home right after the surgery. But if she had a weaker constitution, or if there were any signs of inflammation or side effects, she'd have to stay for 3 days under observation. Jenny got a little anxious. See, she hadn't told her husband about the surgery. She was worried he'd judge her or get angry. He was the old-school type, didn't like the idea of plastic surgery and wasn't exactly open-minded. So she thought, all right. I'll just go through with it quietly. If I have to stay overnight, I'll figure it out. And sure enough, after the operation, her body didn't recover as quickly as hoped. She was required to stay for 3 days. Since she couldn't move much, still groggy from the anesthesia and too weak to do basic things, she had to hire someone to take care of her during her stay. She found a local woman from her neighborhood. Not a professional nurse, just someone familiar and trustworthy. Jenny called her Dih, like a helper auntie, and hired her for 500,000 VND per day. Dih was responsible for everything, helping Jenny eat, drink, go to the bathroom, all of it. Jenny said those first couple of days were a blur. Between the anesthesia and the pain meds, everything felt foggy, like she was floating in and out of consciousness. She didn't remember much at all. Right at the place where that man was said to have died, that was also where she had been lying, supposedly just to rest and recover. At first, everything seemed normal. The sedative had been administered, and she slowly drifted off into unconsciousness. But unlike the usual effect, where people simply fall asleep instantly, this one took its time, her body slipping away gradually. It was like her whole system was shutting down bit by bit. First, her senses dulled. Then she could no longer feel her hands and feet. And eventually, she couldn't even move. It felt like being trapped in her own body, still aware, but completely paralyzed. After about 30 minutes, she finally began to regain some sense of awareness. She could think, she could hear. But her body still felt incredibly weak, like someone who had just given birth. She said her entire body ached, and her head throbbed. Lying there, she tried to speak. She whispered softly, "Di hi I, thak nci," calling out for someone, anyone. but her voice was faint, barely audible. She looked around the room, trying to spot a familiar face, but saw no one. Panic started creeping in. She was too weak to move, too weak to even call for help properly. And being alone in a place like that, it was dangerous. Not just physically, but spiritually. She forced herself to look around more carefully. At her feet. To her sides. Then finally, she looked up. And that's when she saw it. Above her head, near the headboard, a thick cloud of smoke began to billow out, not just a little wisp, but a heavy, theatrical fog, like the kind you see on stage during concerts or in ancient fantasy films. It was dense and unnatural. At first, she thought, oh, maybe it's just some hospital sterilization fog. But as it filled the room, she caught a distinct scent. It wasn't just smoke. It smelled like incense. That unmistakable scent of burning joss sticks, the kind people use during offerings, rituals, or funerals. Mixed in was a subtle smell of old ceremonial money, the kind used for the dead. Suddenly, the connection hit her. That smell, that thick fog, it reminded her of cemeteries. Offerings. Spirits. She became terrified. She tried to cry out again, this time louder. Di-hi-i. Di-hi-i. But her voice was still hoarse. Then, she heard it. A groan. A low, guttural groan from a man. Not loud, but persistent. It echoed, from the right, then the left, behind her, in front of her. It circled around her like someone pacing slowly, groaning as they moved. But she couldn't see anything. The room was too foggy, she could barely even see her own hands. All she could do was hear. And that groaning, it chilled her to the bone. In a final surge of desperation, she screamed, as loud as her weakened body would let her, di-hi-i. At that very moment, she heard someone outside the room, her aunt. She had been walking down the hallway, and the scream pulled her back. The aunt rushed in immediately. Few people know this, but there's something peculiar about the sound of women walking, especially when they are wearing those small plastic flip-flops meant for children. You know the kind, the ones that make that soft slapping sound, slap, 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 as they move. At first, she thought it was nothing. But then the sound got louder, more distinct. Slap, slap. Like someone was slowly pacing around her. Not running. Just walking, steadily, deliberately. That sound wasn't random. It wasn't from outside. It was right there, in the room with her. Something inside her stirred. A strange intuition, something spiritual, not logical. She thought, is that someone coming for me? Even though she couldn't see clearly, she forced herself to look in the direction where she remembered the door had been. Earlier, before the fog rolled in, she'd glanced that way, and now, she tried to align herself to that same spot, even though everything was just smoke and blur. She waited. Hoping. Praying that someone, anyone, would come through that door to rescue her. And then, it happened. She saw something she couldn't even believe. She later said that even if a movie tried to recreate what she saw, it wouldn't look this real. Because this was beyond film. Beyond special effects. It was real. From the fog, the door began to creak open, just a sliver. As soon as it did, everything changed. The thick smoke that had been choking the room. It vanished. In an instant. Gone. Not slowly dispersing, not fading out. Just gone. And through that barely opened door, she heard a voice, trembling and panicked, calling her name. Jenny. Jenny. It's me. It's me, your aunt. Her voice was clear, familiar. And the moment it reached her ears, everything, the fog, the footsteps, the groaning, all disappeared. Just like that. Not even a second later, everything that had terrified her was simply gone. When her aunt entered the room and saw her lying there, tears streaming down her face, barely able to speak, she rushed over in a panic. "Where were you?" she sobbed. "Why did you leave me alone?" You knew I wasn't feeling well. But her aunt looked confused. What are you talking about? I just went out to buy lunch. I was only gone a few minutes. A few minutes, she cried. There was something in here. A ghost. The smoke, the smell, the sound, there was a man in here. Her aunt tried to calm her down, saying, there's nothing here. This isn't even a hospital, it's just a cosmetic surgery clinic. There's no one who died here. No spirits. No ghosts. But she wouldn't stop crying. You don't understand. I saw it. I heard it. It was real. It wasn't in my head. Her aunt waved her off, trying to brush it aside. All right. Let's call the nurse. But even when the nurse came in, she could see how shaken she was. Pale. Trembling. She kept insisting she wanted to leave immediately. She didn't want to stay a second longer. The doctor, a calm man named Dr. V, came in to assess the situation. He'd clearly heard similar stories before. His face showed no surprise, no concern. Just a deep, tired sigh. He tried to reason with her. Your health is still weak. You need to rest a bit more before you go. But she shook her head. No. I need to leave. Right now. Eventually, he agreed to let her go, but only after she signed a release form. A waiver saying the hospital wouldn't be responsible for anything that happened after her early discharge. She signed it without hesitation. Later, when she was telling this story, she remembered something else, another eerie incident. At a different time, during a dental visit, she'd felt something strange. That's when this whole memory came rushing back to her. She said, that fog, that smell, it was just like being in a cemetery. You know that scent? Of incense, of old offerings, of burned paper money? That's exactly what it was. She began wondering. Could it be, was this place once a graveyard? Maybe in the past, decades ago? Maybe back in the 80s or even earlier. She wasn't sure. But she couldn't shake the feeling. That plastic surgery clinic, it might have been built over something forgotten. All right, now let's move on to the third story. As many of you already know, Jenny never really tells long stories. Most of the time, they are short, simple tales from everyday life, the kind of stories that feel real because they are real. This one, she said, happened quite a long time ago, back when she was in her early 20s. At that time, she worked in a pretty unusual job. It wasn't illegal or shady, just something not many people were willing to do back then. But for those who did, it actually paid quite well. She called it a kind of mobile installment selling. Specifically, she bought fabric and sold it on credit, something like a layaway system. Back in the day, that kind of fabric was hard to come by. Sometimes even when you had money, it took effort to get the right materials. So people started buying in bulk and paying later. Jenny had a bit of starting capital, so she bought fabric, loaded it onto her little cart, and went around selling it neighborhood by neighborhood. She focused mostly on areas around Bindng and Dn, working-class places where people didn't have much money but still needed materials for clothing and household items. She'd let customers pay in small installments, maybe over 2 or 3 months, and in return, she could make a decent profit. Sometimes even 4 times what she paid for the fabric. It was tough work, but it earned her a good living. And it was during this time that she met a girl named Feng. Even though Jenny was older, she always referred to her as Feng, Little Feng, just to keep the story simple. At the time, Jenny was in her 20s, while Feng was probably still in her early teens. Despite her young age, Feng was incredibly sharp and resourceful. Her parents had both left, one ran off with a man, the other with a woman, and they abandoned Feng to live alone with her grandmother. Because of that, the love Feng had for her grandma was deep, maybe even deeper than most, since she had no one else. The two of them made a living by collecting and selling bricks, hard, physical work, but just enough to get by. Sometimes, when they had a little extra money, Feng would buy fabric on credit from Jenny. That's how Jenny became familiar with their home. One day, she returned to collect a payment from a previous purchase. But when she got to the house, she was surprised to see a mourning flag hanging at the gate. She rushed inside and found out that Feng's grandmother had passed away just a few days earlier. Since Jenny only visited every week or so, she hadn't heard the news right away. Seeing how sad Feng was, Jenny sat down to chat and check in on her. They talked for a while, and Jenny gently asked if Feng had anyone to lean on, maybe a boyfriend or relatives nearby. Feng opened up. She said that some distant relatives had offered to take her in, saying he was young and talented and could help around the house. But Feng had refused. She loved her grandmother too much. Even though she was scared to be alone, she chose to stay, to take care of the altar, keep the incense burning, and honor her grandma's memory. She said, "It's just me now. But I'll stay here. I can't leave her behind." At that moment, Sister Jenny gently asked, "Hey, you've been missing your grandmother a lot, haven't you? She's gone now. Maybe that's why you dream of her so often." But Feng immediately shook her head. "No, this wasn't a dream. I saw it clearly, wide awake. I wasn't imagining things." Sister Jenny still tried to soothe her. "Sometimes, when we miss someone deeply, especially family, it's not strange to see them in dreams. I've dreamed of my late relatives too. That's normal." But Feng insisted. "No, I saw it, so clear. I wasn't dreaming. I wasn't half asleep. It was real. I even heard it." Now curious, No, despite being scared, sat down too, wanting to hear more. They all gathered, sitting cross-legged, huddled together in silence. Feng continued. She said every night, before bed, she would light incense for her grandmother. After that, she'd shut the big wooden door, an old-style door with a thick wooden beam that could be latched horizontally to secure it tight. Then, she'd crawl into her mosquito net, lie on the bed and face the door, which was about 10 meters away. The thing was, the door didn't close perfectly. It had gaps, a hand width at the top and at the bottom, enough to see outside, or to see someone's feet if they were standing just outside. And that night, as Feng was lying down, she suddenly heard a noise, not a knock, but more like the wood creaking under pressure, like something was pushing softly from outside. Creak, creak. She turned her head instinctively toward the door. And that's when she saw it. Right beneath the door, through the bottom gap, were 2 legs. Not feet. Just the pant legs. Hanging. Touching the floor. She could clearly see the bottom of 2 black pant legs, drooping straight down, but no feet inside them. No legs. Just the pants. And somehow, she knew. Deep inside, she knew. It was her grandmother. Her first reaction was terror, heart racing, breath caught. But almost immediately, fear turned into longing, into love, into aching grief. Her grandmother had come back. She slowly sat up, trembling, but not running. She wanted to see more. She wanted to know. Then, the wooden beam that was locking the door, that thick chunk of wood, began to lift. On its own. Not fast. Not violent. Just, slowly rising, as if invisible hands were lifting it gently. And then, it dropped. Clunk. Loud. Echoing. Like someone had released it deliberately. And then, the door began to open. Slowly. Creak. And there, standing just beyond the door, was her grandmother. Or, something that looked like her. Not exactly standing, not walking. Floating. Just barely above the floor. Still wearing those same black pants, but without feet, without a shadow. Just drifting. Feng stared. She couldn't speak. Couldn't move. But strangely, she wasn't scared anymore. Not in that moment. She whispered. I wasn't afraid, Not even a little. If it happened again today. I might faint from fear. But back then, it was just love. But you know what? At the time, we just thought, maybe it was because Grandma had just passed away. We were all still grieving. Feng, being the way she was, called out loudly. Grandma, you came back to visit me. She wasn't scared at all. Just hungry. She didn't even wait, jumped right out of bed and ran toward the voice. Didn't even hesitate, just like she was about to hug Grandma. I remember my sister Jenny was yelling. Don't go. That's not Grandma. But Feng didn't listen. She was bold, always had been. And I admit, back then, I thought maybe it was out of love, or maybe she just missed Grandma too much. But as she ran, she bumped straight into the table in the middle of the room. It was too dark to see clearly. She hit the table and knocked over the pot on top of it. She tripped and fell hard, letting out a painful scream. We all heard a loud thud, and she cried out, "My leg!" Still, Feng managed to get up, limping toward what she thought was Grandma. But by the time she reached that shadowy spot, Grandma had turned her back and was slowly walking toward the yard outside. Now, this is the terrifying part. As Feng stepped outside, she stood still, completely frozen. As if something had taken control of her. Her body stiffened. Her mouth opened wide in shock. Her eyes were locked on Grandma, standing in the yard, just watching her. Feng later told us that the figure stared at her with the same warm, loving eyes Grandma used to have. Then the figure raised one hand, and started brushing Feng's body. Like she was brushing off dirt or mud. At first, it looked gentle. But then Feng looked closer. It wasn't just dirt. Grandma was brushing off thick, wet clumps of grave mud. The kind that sticks to bodies buried in shallow soil. Worse still. Along with the mud, were pieces of skin. Yes, actual pieces of rotting skin. Every time she brushed, parts of her own decaying body fell off. Flesh, tissue, blood. Right before our eyes, Grandma was transforming. From a kind old woman into something that looked like a corpse, a zombie. We were frozen in fear. And then, like a warning sign, the dogs began howling. Our house dog barked first. Then the neighbors' dogs. Within moments, the entire village echoed with barking. Howls bouncing from house to house. It's true what they say. When dogs howl like that, they see something we can't. Inside, Feng was still frozen. Not moving. Not speaking. Maybe she was still torn, between fear and love for her grandma. But the transformation continued. In less than 3 minutes, the figure that was once our grandmother had turned into a grotesque skeleton. Only scraps of flesh hung from her bones. And then she vanished. No trace. Just silence. Even the dogs stopped barking. The air became still again, like the night had gone back to normal. Feng suddenly gasped, like a weight had been lifted off her chest. She could move again. And she broke down, crying. She cried and cried for what felt like hours. Out of fear. And out of love. It wasn't until the rooster crowed, marking dawn, that she finally came back inside. That next morning, my sister Jenny said something chilling. Honestly, I didn't want to believe it. But after hearing you cry and scream last night, and seeing the mess outside, the broken teacups, the overturned table, and your bruised leg, I don't think it was just a bad dream anymore. Oh my God. When Jenny looked closely, yes, it was her. From her knee all the way up to her thigh, it was bruised, dark purple, just like the wound she'd gotten the day she fell. It wasn't something that could appear on its own. You'd have to run hard and fall hard to get something like that. But Feng had been limping ever since, walking unevenly, just like the ghost that Jenny saw that night. That was when Jenny truly began to believe. She stood up and walked over to the altar. She lit 3 sticks of incense and spoke out loud, not disrespectfully, but with sincerity. If you're truly gone, then please rest in peace. Don't linger, don't scare the living. Let us continue with our lives. When you were alive, we never held grudges or anger toward each other. You'd often pass by when I was selling things down the alley. So, please don't appear before me anymore. I'm terrified. I've heard how powerful you were in the spirit world. I often come home late from selling paperwork, walking through these dark alleys. If you show up, I swear I'll die on the spot. After praying, she left the incense and went home. A few days later, someone else passed by and ran into Feng again. This time, it was a man with a different story, but still connected to Feng's grandmother. He was a neighbor. His house was right next to Feng's, right next to the house where her grandmother had lived. But he had been working in Saigon as an architect, usually only returning home every couple of months. Sometimes even longer. So he didn't know the grandmother had passed. By the time he returned, it was already the second or third week since her funeral. There were no more flags or funeral signs outside the house. That night, on his way back home, he had to pass Feng's house. As he approached, he saw someone sitting right in front, the silhouette of an old woman, sitting calmly in a chair. Even from afar, he could hear the familiar sound, the gentle clicking of someone chewing betel nuts. That sound, it was unmistakable. It was how he had always recognized her, the old woman, chewing betel as she sat at the front of the house. As he came closer, he could clearly see her sitting there, just like before, on her usual chair, looking up at the sky. He greeted her politely, as a good neighbor would. "Hey. It's already so late. Why are you sitting out here by yourself? You should go inside and rest." He chuckled lightly and continued, "I just got back this month. I was planning to visit you tomorrow anyway." But the woman didn't respond. She just sat still, eyes staring ahead, quietly chewing. He thought maybe she was hard of hearing, she was old, after all, so he smiled, waved, and said again, "All right then. I'll see you tomorrow. I brought some fruit for you." Then he walked home and had a good night's sleep. The next morning, he went to the market, bought more fruit, and came over to Feng's house like he'd said. When he entered, he saw something he hadn't expected, a full funeral set up inside the house. There was a large altar, offerings everywhere. It was clear that the family was still in the 49-day mourning period. He stood frozen, holding the tray of fruit in his shaking hands. His face went pale. Then he asked, trembling, "Feng, your grandmother, when did she pass away?" Feng smiled politely and said, "Oh, uncle. You're back? Grandma passed away about 2 or 3 weeks ago. We just finished her second and third incense ceremonies." He slowly placed the tray down on the altar, his hands still shaking. Then he looked at Feng again, voice still trembling. "Feng, last night I saw your grandma." He explained everything, the chair, the sound of her chewing, their conversation. Feng looked a bit emotional at first, her eyes soft, maybe even a little sad, but when he finished his story, she smiled. "Yeah? Grandma still comes back to visit me. All the time." Back then, that man was completely spooked. He rushed to tell the story to Ms. Jenny, and she in turn told it back to him again to make sure they weren't just imagining things. He said, luckily, he had bought a small tray of fruit earlier, planning to gift it to someone, but now, he brought it straight to the altar to offer. He went to the old house, lit incense sticks, and prayed at the family altar, quietly saying, "If you truly returned, please don't appear like that anymore. It's terrifying. If I hadn't known about your passing, maybe it wouldn't have scared me that much. But now that I do, it's a different kind of fear entirely." So, he bowed, offered the fruit, and prayed in silence for peace. After that, he quickly left and from then on, made it a rule to never come home too late again. He told himself, better to get home by 6 or 7 at the latest. Don't linger outside too long or risk another late-night encounter with Grandma Hai. And that was the third story. One that Ms. Jenny didn't witness herself, but heard it told directly from the person who experienced it. Now, let's move on to the fourth story. This time, it's not your typical terrifying ghost tale. Instead, it leans more toward the realm of spiritual experiences, stories that are sacred, mysterious, and just as powerful. Ms. Jenny told me she had personally witnessed something, and that many of her friends had gone through similar experiences, all tied to a particular shrine. A place known for its spiritual energy. She first learned about this shrine through a very close friend of hers. Now, Ms. Jenny made it clear, she wasn't saying this to speak ill of anyone, but simply telling the story as it was. Her friend, she said, had a truly kind heart, gentle, thoughtful, and always living with sincerity. That's exactly why she cherished their friendship so much. But, she also admitted something. Outwardly, her friend wasn't considered attractive. In fact, in her exact words, honestly, she was really unfortunate looking. Still, she emphasized, I loved her because of her soul. But I did worry about her. People can be quick to judge based on appearances, and I didn't know how her future, her love life, her marriage, would turn out because of that. At that time, they were both still young, just in their late teens, maybe early 20s. But years went by, and they eventually lost touch. Then one day, out of the blue, her friend showed up at Ms. Jenny's house. The moment she stepped in, Ms. Jenny was stunned. It was like seeing a completely different person. She was elegant, poised, and refined, holding a fancy handbag, the kind you only saw in magazines. And this was over a decade ago, yet she was already carrying a laptop, using a high-end Nokia phone, and wore designer glasses. At first glance, Ms. Jenny didn't even recognize her. But when she sat down and they began talking, she realized, yes, it was truly her old friend. And no, there was no plastic surgery. Her face was still the same. But somehow, she had become beautiful. Not the kind of beauty you see on magazine covers, but graceful, dignified, and glowing. Ms. Jenny laughed as she told me, back then, I would have given her maybe 2 or 3 points, and even that was being generous. But now? She's at least a solid 6 or 7. The kind of woman people notice when she walks into a room. They caught up on everything, their childhoods, how life had changed, and eventually, Ms. Jenny couldn't help but ask. Look, I'm just going to be honest. Back then, you were not great looking. I loved you because you had a good heart. But now, you've completely transformed. What happened? How did you glow up like this? Her friend didn't take offense. In fact, she laughed and said, I know. You don't even have to say it. I knew what I looked like. Then she leaned in and said. So the woman said. Let me tell you this story, believe it or not, that's up to you. I'm just telling it the way it happened to me. She shared that, back when she was younger, she was struggling a lot with her self-image. Even though it was time for her to start thinking about marriage, she felt deeply insecure about her appearance. One day, someone told her about a sacred temple in Lifeu, the temple of Lady Chua X in the Vien Cao area. Some of you from BNDNG might recognize that name, but for me, that was the first time I'd heard of it. She decided to go. Back then, she was feeling hopeless. But as she stepped into the temple, something shifted. You see, people who are at their lowest, when they walk into a sacred place like that, their prayers, their words, they come from a place of raw, honest desperation. She knelt and prayed with all her heart, asking only for a man who would see her for who she truly was. Not someone who loved her for her looks, just someone who could appreciate her inner self. She promised. If someone loves me sincerely, I'll love him back with everything I have. I'll take care of our family. I'll be the best wife I can be. After the offering, she went home, logged onto the internet, maybe it was Facebook or Zing.me back then, and started exploring those Find a Friend groups. And that's how she met him, a Taiwanese man. At first, she admitted, she was nervous. She had to fix up her pictures a little bit, just enough to look presentable. But surprisingly, the man didn't seem to care about appearances. In fact, when he finally came to Vietnam to visit her, he recognized her instantly and wasn't the least bit put off. He told her, "You should have shown me your real face from the beginning. I'm not here for appearances. I'm here for the person." After that, everything changed. He bought her a new motorbike, a phone, even a laptop. He built a house for her and her mother. But most importantly, he trusted her to manage everything in Vietnam while he worked abroad. Because she was smart, capable. And from that moment on, her life turned around completely. Now back to Jenny. When Jenny heard this story, she couldn't help but feel something stir in her heart. At the time, Jenny was also struggling. Her business was failing, debts were piling up, over 300 million VND. She was separated from her husband, and she had a young child to raise. Her husband? Always chasing other women. And with so much financial pressure, she was on the edge. So she decided to go to the same temple. She couldn't afford any offerings, no fruit, not even incense. She barely scraped together enough for gas. When she arrived, she only lit 3 sticks of incense and prayed, sincerely, with everything she had left inside. Then, she drew a sacred fortune stick, and what she read changed her. The message said, "By the 5th month, help will arrive. A noble person will lend a hand. But do not be too greedy, or danger will follow." At that moment, she was skeptical. 2 months from now? Someone will help me. Still, she folded the fortune paper and tucked it into her wallet. Then, she went back home, tired, worried, but with a tiny spark of hope. She went back to working hard, day after day, just trying to make ends meet for her and her child. Every year, around May, strange things always seemed to happen. That particular May, a close friend of Jenny invited her to a gathering at a large estate. It was owned by a wealthy older man, and the land was massive, several acres, with a long, intimidating gate leading up to the main villa. At first, Jenny had no idea what she was walking into. She thought it was just a friendly get-together. But after a few weeks of gradually getting to know the man and his circle, things took a strange turn. The old man took a liking to Jenny, so much so that he offered to pay off all of her debts. And he did. Then, one day, he confessed that he wanted to marry her. His wife had passed away long ago, and he had no daughter. Jenny, it seemed, had filled a void in his life. But Jenny was firm. She wasn't looking to take advantage of him, and she made that clear from the beginning. She explained that although she appreciated his help, she could not enter a relationship while she was still legally married. Her husband may have abandoned her, but the divorce wasn't finalized. She told the man that she planned to repay every NG he had given her. And he, being kind, told her not to worry about interest. They remained friends. Over time, though, Jenny admitted that her feelings had started to shift. Slowly, like water carving through stone, she started to care for him, not just out of gratitude, but out of something more. He was wealthy beyond imagination, owning several factories in the Songtien industrial zone. And he treated her with a kind of calm gentleness. She couldn't deny the comfort of it. And oddly enough, the fortune sticks had predicted it all. The first stick said she'd meet a benefactor in May. The second? A warning, be careful. Great danger may come. She didn't think much of that second one, until something happened. One day, after visiting his home many times, Jenny decided to buy a pair of house slippers so she wouldn't track dirt into his clean villa. But when she returned the next time, she found the slippers slashed. Clean, deliberate cuts, nothing like a dog bite. When she asked the man, he said, "Oh, maybe a dog chewed them." But Jenny knew better. Dogs tear. They don't slice in straight lines. It didn't take her long to learn the truth. His daughter, the only child, was furious about her father's interest in Jenny. And she wasn't just upset, she was dangerous. Not only was she fiercely protective of her father's wealth, but she was the daughter of a powerful, wealthy man herself, someone who could make things disappear if she wanted to. From that day on, Jenny was terrified. She started to believe the second fortune stick had been right. The danger wasn't from the man, it was from his own blood. She went back to the temple and burned incense. She stared at the fortune stick and whispered, maybe this wasn't just a coincidence. Right now, you and I, we're not close anymore. But I still want to keep this friendship between us. We're not like we used to be, but I'll try my best to save up and pay you back, so that we don't owe each other anything. From now on, I won't ever come near that house again. Never. That man, the one I mentioned before? He's moved back down south to the countryside, somewhere around Tinjong or Qianzhong, and he's living a quiet life now. But that land, that cursed place, I'll never forget it. It was just too strange, too full of bad energy. After I ended things with him, I returned to the shrine. I put all my faith in the spiritual power of that place. I truly believe it's sacred. That's why I'm not afraid to tell people what happened. Because honestly, between him and me, nothing really happened. We never slept together. We never even said we loved each other. There was no cheating. At most, we held hands, we hugged, but even a kiss? No. Never. He wasn't someone I wanted to build a future with. He was just a moment in my life, a lesson. That's the first story. The most haunted one. And that shrine, it witnessed it all. Now, let me tell you about the second story. A few years later, I finally managed to get back on my feet financially. You know, when you're drowning in debt and constantly worried about money, bad luck just clings to you. But when you finally have a little extra, the luck starts coming back too. It's like a kind of magnetic energy. Even science talks about this, the law of attraction. When all you ever think about is fear, pain, and loss, those things seem to find you faster. But when you choose to live with joy, with hope, with a positive mind, happiness finds its way back to you. And I've lived through that. I've experienced it myself. After I paid off my debt, it was like a weight lifted from my brain. I could think clearly again. I started to see opportunities all around me, things I never noticed before. I wasn't rich, no. But I was definitely better off than I had been. I opened a small garden cafe. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. And one day while I was running the cafe, this guy walked in. Now let me be clear, I'm going to call him, this guy, because if I say, that man, people will start complaining. So this guy, he was a driver. A rough one, too. Very blunt, very loud. But deep down, he was a decent man. Never scammed anyone, never lied. What you saw was what you got. That day, he came in looking completely defeated. I asked what was wrong. He told me he'd just been in an accident. It wasn't his fault, but, you know how these things go. Even if you're in the right, it's hard to prove. So the police had temporarily confined him to the local area, like a soft form of house arrest while they investigated. If he was found guilty, he'd be fined or maybe even sentenced, possibly 3 to 5 years. He'd lose his job as a professional driver. The best he could do after that would be to drive a motorbike taxi. But if he was cleared, he'd be free to return to his job and continue supporting his family. He looked so worried, poor guy. So I told him, look, I don't know if you believe in spiritual stuff or not, but I have a place. The Shrine of Bhx, near Lithu. Take this offering. Go there. Burn some incense. Be honest. Don't ask for anything greedy, just speak the truth. And that's exactly what he did. He went up to the shrine, lit his incense, and prayed. He said, if I'm guilty, I'll accept whatever punishment. But if I've done nothing wrong, please, help me clear my name so I can keep working and provide for my family. And you know what? 2 weeks later, the results came in. He came running into my cafe, grinning ear to ear. He said, that's it, I'm celebrating tonight. Drinks on me, tonight is round 1, tomorrow is round 2. Oh my God. The court declared me innocent. Honey. I'm free. He was overwhelmed with joy. His shout was as loud as if he had just won the lottery. After all that despair and fear, he was finally cleared. Even Miss Jenny laughed, though still a bit cautious. "I told you. That shrine up there is no joke, it's sacred. As long as you didn't do anything wrong, you'd be fine." She reminded him gently. "All right, go ahead, celebrate. But remember to return to that shrine and make your offering. You don't need anything fancy, just a small fruit tray. That's enough. You can't just receive blessings and walk away, you know." He nodded, still emotional. "I told you all along I didn't do anything wrong. I only followed your advice because I was scared. But I wasn't guilty in the first place, so why would I have to repay anything?" Jenny frowned and responded, "Look, you may have been innocent, but sometimes misunderstandings and coincidences can ruin you. If the evidence had been just a little different, you'd be rotting in prison now." She looked him in the eye. "Please, go back up there. Make your offering. Don't take sacred places lightly." He shrugged, still half skeptical. They finished their coffee and parted ways. Just 2 days later, he returned, but this time with his entire leg in a cast. He hobbled into her place, wincing in pain. "What happened to you now?" Jenny asked in shock. "A truck hit me," he groaned, pointing at his injured leg. "Can you believe it? They were at fault, but I'm the one stuck like this." Jenny shook her head and sighed. "Didn't I warn you? You went drinking and partying, but couldn't spare a few bucks for a fruit tray. You'd blow $1 million on alcohol but couldn't spend $100 or $2 to give thanks. That spirit pushed you, I swear. You didn't repay the favor, you mocked it." Panicked now, he pleaded. "Can you take me back up there? Please? I'll go. I'll do it properly this time." She agreed, and they drove to the shrine. He limped to the altar, bowed low, and left his offering with genuine sincerity. That's one story. But it's far from the only one. Miss Jenny was witness to many strange happenings around that shrine. Another involved an older woman who lived nearby. One day, she was seen riding a motorbike with 2 children, perhaps her kids, or maybe her grandchildren, and some heavy bags of rice. They were crossing a narrow wooden bridge leading toward the shrine. But the bridge was too narrow, or maybe the bags too heavy, and as they crossed, the motorbike slipped. All 3 of them fell into the river below, and drowned. A tragic accident. The entire area mourned them. People brought incense and offerings to the shrine, praying for peace. Then, during one of the shrine's ceremonial festivals, in front of over 100 people, a woman suddenly stood up and began acting strangely. Her voice changed, her mannerisms became childlike. She looked around, frightened. Then, without warning, she screamed. "Let's play, let's swim." She jumped into the river. Everyone panicked. The woman didn't even know how to swim. It was as if she had been possessed, by one of the drowned children perhaps. They pulled her out just in time, drenched and trembling. Some thought she was mentally ill, rambling nonsense under the blazing sun. But Miss Jenny, who had seen enough to know better, knew this was no coincidence. The shrine, it was real. The spirits, the warnings, the blessings and the punishments, it was all real. But I was just a kid back then. People were crowding around, whispering, arguing, even laughing nervously. The whole area was filled with noise. Suddenly, she jumped again. Yes, the woman leapt straight into the river a second time. Everyone screamed. She didn't know how to swim, and yet she jumped. Someone had to dive in and pull her out again. At that point, people started to realize. This wasn't just someone fainting or acting strange. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Still, no one connected it to what had happened weeks earlier. Not yet. Not until she started speaking again. Sitting there in front of the shrine, barefoot and soaked, she began to talk like a child. It didn't sound like her voice anymore. She said she wanted to go back to school. She wanted her backpack. She wanted new school supplies. People murmured among themselves. Some even went out to buy her those things. Backpacks, notebooks, pencils, like she was a real child again. Then someone remembered. 12 weeks ago, 3 people had drowned near that exact same bridge. A grandmother and 2 children. And the youngest one was a little girl. That's when the whispers turned into a wave. People believed she had been possessed by the spirit of that child. Even Jenny, who had been skeptical until then, felt uneasy. She didn't know what to believe anymore. And then, it happened again. The woman suddenly stood up. She ran. Ran straight toward the river. This time, she began to undress. Piece by piece. Right there, in front of the crowd. Not like she was trying to get attention. But as if something inside her needed to be free. She stripped down completely. Naked. Eyes wide open. And she jumped. Right into the river again. The men nearby were frozen. Some covered their eyes out of modesty. Others turned away, embarrassed. Only a few women dared to jump in after her and pull her out. At that point, it was clear. She couldn't stay near the shrine anymore. Something was haunting her. Possessing her. So, they decided to take her back home. A few kilometers away, on a motorbike. One woman covered her with a piece of cloth. An old man, maybe a ex-EOM driver, sat in front and helped guide the way. They had just passed the same bridge where the previous drownings had happened. When suddenly, she screamed. "Let me go. Why are you taking me? Who are you?" She shouted like a terrified child. Crying, yelling. It wasn't until they got farther away, beyond the area around the shrine, that she finally quieted down. And when they reached her house, she was back to normal. Or so they thought. She had no memory of what had happened. The woman thanked them for helping her. And that was that. Back at the shrine, people started lighting incense. Some went home. Some stayed, whispering about what they'd witnessed. But Jenny couldn't leave. She needed answers. So she approached an old man who had been standing near the shrine. People called him Ong LC. One of the elders who knew the area well. He told her the truth. That little girl who had drowned weeks ago. It wasn't just a coincidence. And the shrine itself. It wasn't built for worship. Years ago, during the French War, this land was used as a military outpost. A bomb had fallen right here, killing an entire group of soldiers. Since then, strange things happened in this area. People heard voices in the trees, saw shadows in the tall grass, felt cold hands brushing past at night. So the locals built a shrine. Not to honor any deity, but to calm the spirits. They called it Miwamhn, the Shrine of Restless Souls. A place to keep the dead from walking too far into the world of the living. Now, to be clear, no one was asking the shrine for fortune or miracles at first. All people did was stop by, light some incense, and pray for peace. They'd say things like, "I'm just passing through. Please let me travel safely. I mean no harm. Please don't follow me." Simple things. Respectful things. But over time, as more and more people visited, something strange began to happen. Some said that after praying at the shrine, their luck changed. Business suddenly picked up. Illnesses faded. Lost things were found. At first, it was just 1 or 2 people. But then, word spread. One story became 10. 10 became 100. Before long, people started believing that the shrine had a guardian spirit. And they gave it a name. They started calling it the Shrine of Lady Chwarex, the Lady of the Land. Eventually, a sign was even put up. Miu Ba Chwarex, the Shrine of the Lady. Offerings increased. Prayers became more elaborate. People began to treat it as a holy site. But according to the elders, that shrine was never meant to worship a goddess. It had always been a place for the wandering souls, especially the spirits of fallen soldiers. That's the truth. The original name was Miwamchen, the Shrine of Restless Spirits. That's what it was built for. And even though people now worship Ba there, even though some claim the spirit blesses them with prosperity, the energy at that shrine is something else entirely. There are still accidents that happen nearby. Not every year, but every few years, someone drowns. And those with weak spirits, those sensitive to energy, say they can still see things, still feel the cold presence of soldiers wandering near the riverbank. The old man, Ong Lc. He had many more stories about that place. Stories we didn't even have time to tell today. But perhaps we'll save those for another night.